Well, let me kick this off. Today's leader forum, and I forgot to actually look at, remind myself of the full title of this. So today's leader forum, we are talking about um, disrupting traditional technical evaluations and seeing if there's other things we can do besides POCs. If you've been looking anywhere on LinkedIn recently, you've seen a lot of sales or customers pivoting to wanting to see POCs everywhere. And sometimes it's completely unavoidable. Sometimes it's the right way to go. But are there other things that we can do to demonstrate value outside of POC approaches? Even if we're going to do a POC, how else can we demonstrate value in our sales approaches? And to do that, I've got three of our partners joining us today to talk through this topic, giving you a chance to hear directly from some of PreSales Collective's partners. First, I've got AJ, who is joining us from Storylane. He is the head of business at Storylane. We have Akash Ganapathy, who is the CEO at Opine, and Dan Katz, who is the GM go-to-market operations at DemoStack. So welcome to each of you. Welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome.
Excellent. Logistically, if you are chatting, it looks like everyone's been doing this, but make sure your chat is set to everyone. Please feel free to join in the chat there. Towards the end of our hour, we'll also have a Q&A. So if you have questions that you want to ask, and you can throw them in the chat if you'd like, but if you want them specifically for the Q&A at the end, there's a separate Q&A box at the bottom. Submit your questions there, and we'll get those in the Q&A section. So as we're going along. The question I want to kick us off with first, and Akash, I'll shoot it over to you to answer this one out of the gate, and then we'll kind of move around here. I guess, while we're talking about POCs, what, if anything, is actually wrong with the typical POC structure? Why do we even have to look at alternatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say there's a lot of things that stand out, but I'll try and keep it focused. Basically, I think the traditional POC, if you will, it's very like feature and functionality oriented, right? We're producing test cases and evidence for like meeting them. There's kind of like the need to have, nice to have roadmap type items. It almost feels like an RFP, but just like in practical format. There's SEs configuring and building product. POCs are typically unpaid, if it's not like a paid pilot. You have to get like a technical win before you can, and that's not even a guarantee that the actual deal will close, right? So you get this technical win. And even if you're the vendor of choice, you may not be the final vendor selected based on like budget, other business kind of practical reasons. Unless that's not even getting into like the time horizons, right? Like weeks, months of testing potentially, and all the like coordination and admin kind of work and everything that goes into delivering the overhead, right? So it's obviously a cost of the sales cycle, right? So um, that customer acquisition cost. So I think there's just a lot of reasons people want to like skip it, right? If at all possible. I'll just go ahead and maybe a good segue for the rest of the combo or the next part of the combo, or maybe other people are going to answer this. But I think the problem is that buyers actually dictate to some degree the sales process, and it's their buying process. And that's the hard part, is like we could just not do it, we wouldn't do it. But I think you alluded to it, like buyers are really demanding it. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So sometimes it becomes unavoidable. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna say, to add on to that, Akash, I think it's a reaction to one thing, and that's buyer uncertainty, right? Like I can think of a POC as like an expensive insurance policy for lack of clarity, right? If a buyer wants to go jump into a POC and that is the next gate in their process, they're doing it because they don't have confidence in what you've already showed them in the sales process. And I think the other piece, and I say this because I've been an SE, I've been an SE leader. It's kind of my spirit home in an organization. It kind of feels like you're walking on a tightrope in that sort of high stakes demo situation. You have these requirements. You're scrambling to customize your solution to meet those, and the buyers can feel that, and you don't want a feeling of tension in your buying process. You want a feeling of confidence and ease. So that's my take on it.
I think those two answers pretty much sums up everything. But from my perspective, I'd like to add just two more items. One primarily is the misaligned success criteria itself, because there are a lot of chefs trying to cook the pot and then trying to pull the evaluation in terms of how they would want to set things up. That becomes much more difficult while managing the traditional POC process. And the second part, it could be very focused and oriented towards the go-to-market, but it's loss of the narrative control itself. How do I want to present the product's value? How it's getting interpreted during the POC? And then finally, what do they consume out of the end? So everything is the loss of control happens through every single conversation that happens during the POC process. And most often or not, these signals might not be captured, but these signals are the ones that actually fumble the POC at the rear end and then try to look either the product in a bad light, or the people who are managing it in a bad light, or the people who are actually evaluating in a bad light too. So these two are the other signals that I would also like to add to the mix.
Yeah.
I love that, like that phrase, the loss of the loss of control of the narrative.
Yeah.
I think
That
that's
was
spot
awesome.
on, right? You're throughout the sales cycle, you're seeking to try and control the narrative, control how people are viewing and consuming. I guess AJ, I'd love to have you kind of maybe, let's use a phrase, double click on that. Let's go a little bit deeper into in that narrative control piece. How do you can you, during your narrative, when you are controlling it, move towards value without a POC, or can you maybe position the POC differently within the narrative? How would you retain that control if it was a best case scenario?
So in a best case scenario, the narrative can be split into different parts based on the engagement that happens during the entire sales cycle. So the narrative can be set with the objectives during the discovery or after the discovery is done. And then that helps identify whether the POC is actually needed or not. From the seller's perspective, we are just thinking from our narrative piece. From the buyer's perspective, they might be evaluating 5 different other tools. So that
Mhm.
also influences how we would want to control the narrative from our side. But when they hear X, Y, and Z from the other buyers, that also gets fed into the process when we are trying to drive our value. So helping the buyers understand what noise is for their problem is also inclusive in the narrative piece. And then when we try to cut down the other noise factors and try to amplify the signal that we would want to deliver, that's when the buyer also recognizes and understands whether a POC is actually needed or not. And most often or not, the narrative control can be split up into parts so that the confidence and the trust gets built during the conversations. And then the product comes at the, say, after 65 or 70% of the sale is already done. So that's how I feel the narrative control can also factor in and influence the overall buying process.
Yeah, Dan or Akash, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic as well, the narrative control during the sales process.
Yeah. I don't know, Dan, if you want to go first. I feel like, yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think getting to the point as quickly as possible where those prospects can see themselves using your solution is the best way to gain that confidence. So there's two answers I have. So that's one, and then also remembering that we're not only selling product in our sales process, we're selling ourselves. We're selling ourselves as a company, and the weight that that carries, that people like to do business with other people. People make decisions based on perceived trust and rapport, goes into it a lot. So, for me, ideally, I don't want to get to a traditional POC, with technologies like the ones that AJ and I use in our companies. You can give them something better, right? You can give them like a POC light where it's very quick to tailor that product that you're trying to sell, and then give them something, as a leave behind to circulate around. And that process, that experience, I think, builds a lot of trust because they feel like they can be hands-on, but you're spending 10 minutes rather than 3 weeks in preparing something that feels like it's made for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just add that like as going, I really like what you said, like around they're buying you, they're
Yeah.
buying kind of, that relationship as well. Um, Back to the narrative piece, one thing I would add is like, what are the critical value moments, like the aha moments that you're trying to make sure that they feel, right? If you don't, and by you I mean if we as sellers don't have an idea of what that is, and I consider sales engineers, solutions engineers, sellers as well, right? We're part of that
Oh yeah.
motion. And like, and not everyone does, but I definitely do. If we don't have an idea of what those aha moments are even supposed to be, like how are we supposed to set them up to feel that? And so I feel like you can ask a lot of folks in a sales org, like, what are the aha moments you'd expect a customer to feel in your product? And they don't even have an answer. I think as SEs, we're the ones that have the answers most of the time. It's like, well, this is where customers usually feel the aha. This is where they feel the aha. And like we can relate to the customer better. And that's why we have an answer to that question. Um, and so it's almost like our responsibility to make sure that we're setting them up for those aha moments. And even if that's in a more like proof of value, like type of motion where they're going to really be in the product, they're going to put in their own data or whatever, um, just making sure the success criteria are aligned and that we know they're going to hit that feeling early in the process so that you might even be able to just cut it off early. They're already sold. Always be pushing for like, even if you had to start a POC, how do you just end it as soon as possible? Because they're just like, we've seen enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those aha moments, we by default like to think of them as this is so amazing. Look at this. This is the great outcomes that you're going to get. But the negative aha moments I think are just as powerful if they're authentic and honest. Like, hey, this is an area where a lot of customers will fail if, they're not thinking about these things or planning for these things. We've seen these these characteristics in a team that's going to buy and implement this product be successful. We're not necessarily hearing that or seeing that, with you. What do you think about that? So again, it's like opportunities to build trust, be authentic, be real.
And great points on aha moments. I would like to add just one more perspective to it. Whatever we are just discussing in this forum is how to manufacture these aha moments too. So it's not the product can deliver an aha moment, but can we have those steps incorporated through the evaluation, through the education, through the awareness that we build, through all the efforts that we do? Can we manufacture aha moments at every single time? A blog that a user or a potential buyer lands and then delivers the aha moment, it starts there and then it
Yes.
files one after the other in order for us to be at that right point and say, hey, though you're evaluating 5, 6 different tools, we have curated every single instance for you to witness and get those aha moments. So it's not only limited to the solution engineer jumping on the last call, pulling out the card that's not available in the deck, and then trying to win the customer. So it's a cumulative effect of all the go-to-market teams working together to come to that POC stage and then trying to deliver, maybe make them realize the aha moment, which was manufactured throughout their journey.
I love that. I love that.
So you're really trying to, from hearing all of you say this, not make it so that when you get into the POC is when you're discovering all of the things that are going to make you like the product. You're instead maybe only just confirming, or maybe you're making sure that you have understood all of those aha moments, value statements correctly before you got there, right? I'd heard someone once mention the most successful proof of concepts are ones where the customer is already fully convinced this is the right solution. They're just making sure they didn't miss anything, right?
Yeah.
As if so you're using it to confirm rather than to select. I'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit if we go into specifically kind of shifting the focus from if you've got a customer who wants to do a POC with you because they want to see how your solution works, how do you shift that into a POC that is proving the value that you can bring? Because I believe that's a big shift when you've got that. Because some customers, like we say, when you're working with them, they have their process they're going through. They're like, no, we need to see these features in order to buy. How do you shift that before you get there so that you're set up for success? Dan, let's go back to you, as I know we've you've got some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the first thing, our tendency as solutions professionals is we want to show how great our solution is. We want to say yes. We want to show every feature. I think we have to stop showing everything, and we need to start showing the one thing that is going to distinctly address the outcome or the challenge that the people we're talking to are dealing with. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're showing a demo of like the whole product in a sort of traditional demo environment. We have a specific customer who did a great job of kind of chunking up their solution into very use case specific, outcome specific demos that they mix and match together based on what the buyer wants to understand or see. And so rather than defocusing them by saying, well, here's this feature and here's this feature and here's this feature, it's about, okay, let's put together a flow that would be relevant for the problem you're trying to solve. Give them that, let them get their hands on it just like it was a real product, let them circulate it around inside their organization. That has been really successful for them. So I think, you know, getting off of our natural instinct to just say yes and to really challenge and push back, like, hey, I know you want to see this and this, but let's focus on the problem you're trying to solve and the approach that we would take using our solution to help you address that.
Yes. I'd love to jump into, and I do think like Dan brings up a great point around like scope, basically is how I interpret it, right? And I'll maybe try and wrap in one of the questions that came in on like a networking tool. It maybe doesn't demo well. And so can you still avoid the POC? And how do you bring it back to business values? Kind of like what the original question was, instead of just features and function. And I think Dan gave a great example of like, we'll have a flow that maps out specific to what their actual objective is.
Yeah.
And someone in chat had mentioned qualification, right? And ultimately, I think SEs tend to shy away from being like the person that's like qualifying a deal or, driving towards what the actual business outcome is. It's kind of like the AE's job, the sales rep's job. But I think that's a big part of what we're talking about, right? Is there a business case? Is there real value to be had, right? And doing that value discovery is almost like more of an SE exercise sometimes, because a lot of the technical implementation details are relevant to whether or not that value can actually be delivered, right? The sales rep's perspective is like, of course, because we're talking about the high level goal of accomplish, improved network security. That's a value prop for everybody. But then only the SE would understand, like, actually for these people in their environment, like it's actually not, because they already have these mitigating whatevers, these other tools, or like we don't integrate with whatever. Like all of that is a factor in like, is it their technical fit? Is there really like a business case here? And I think it's really important that SEs are willing to like get in that conversation and like, qualify a deal. And then to tie it back to the question that was asked in chat, I think some products are genuinely better suited to a proof of concept, or proof of value is what I prefer the term, if you have to run one, a POV, instead of a demo, to like accomplish the tool. And that's kind of what our product focuses more on, is like those types of platforms that maybe have to run a POV. And I think it comes back to aha moments, where it's like, maybe your customer won't feel the aha unless they see their data and they get like a network like alert, right? Like some type of security alert in their environment. And they're like, wow, this tool helped me catch a real issue with one of our firewall configurations or something. And if it's going to be something that specific, that's the aha moment, then you might need their data, right? And the question comes down to like, can you do it with a smaller scope of their data, minimum success criteria, still drive towards like the aha moments you can deliver, have some templatized approach to it so it's repeatable and it's not the Wild West. And like all these things can make it not a traditional POC and still a very focused proof of value with something to like tie back to as a business value case at the end.
That's actually amazing to break the entire POC into smaller chunks and then make it executable. If it's smaller, it's easily executable and it's faster. So the values can be just knocked out even before they could react. So
Yeah.
that's like a tack that anyone trying to enable a POC can instantly deliver those wins, so that as sellers, we can hook ourselves to those early deliverable wins that was done in the earlier stages of POC, which was low weight, and then try to push that around through the entire cycle. My other perspective is try to do the reverse discovery, which means if they are buying the POC, then we need to buy the win from them. So technically, then the discovery happens with them on the outcomes that they would want to deliver, not just on the functional level, not just on the leadership level, but on the organizational level. And then try to, again, to pin it back to Akash's comment, try to take that objective of the organization and then convert that into the easy win that we can deliver over the POC, so that suddenly the function, the management, and the organization is aligned to the POC that we have just delivered. And it was just a very low weight thing that we were able to move the needle from one to the other. That actually drives more value from my experience. And again, adding to the point on aha moments, there could be these self-explanatory or self-evaluating tools that can be incorporated to the entire ecosystem. So it's not necessarily that everything has to be like their data. Certain chunks of experiences that can be self-explanatory can also be maybe converted into, say, synthetic data, or even top level funnel data that can be much more interactive. This helps us deliver these wins faster, aligned to the goals across three levels of pillars. One is functional, one is leadership, and one is the organizational, and still try to deliver the value at the earliest.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I love what your kind of the first half. Well, both points were good. The first half, what you were saying really resonated with me, is sometimes when you have to do the POC, find ways to break it into smaller chunks, right? I think the control, that's the whole control, continue to control the narrative, control the deliverable, that if there's no reason why a POC or a proof of value even has to be a full mini replica of production. It could be, let's just test this one piece. This is
Right.
where you're having problems today. Let's look at that specifically. Let's deploy that in a really small environment, get one thing, and we're testing one thing, we're confirming it works, and we're going to be out. I think, I forget, was it Akash who said it before? Or I forget who said it. Maybe whoever said it can claim it. Do a POC, and then when you're done and you're successful, stop doing the POC at that point. Kind of gets back to that as well. I do have kind of a separate question. Akash, I'll go back to you for this one, because a lot of times when we're looking at POCs, they can feel like it's a delay or a stall to getting someone deployed. Is it ever worth having that conversation? This is delaying your time to value. I've seen that go well. I've seen that not go well. If ever, when should we have that conversation? Akash, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I do have a strong opinion on this. And yeah, I do think this conversation can work. I'll try and tie in another question that came in through the chat. Someone asked, like, what happens if your customer is just demanding like a full POC and you can't necessarily like, push them through like a more sandbox flow or a customer reference call or something like that. These alternate forms of proof that I think are like game changers in today's like, selling motion. But if they're just kind of demanding it, how do you scope it, like make it as short as possible? And I think for those that didn't understand what Jack's question maybe was, it's like, can you tell a customer, hey, you really don't want to run a POC because you have this business goal to get everything rolled out by the end of August. It's already July 9th. If you run a POC, we won't even start the real deployment until like the end of August. You won't have this out till September, October. Like it's not going to fit your timeline. Why don't you talk to like our customers and so on and so forth, and we could get started much sooner, actually hit these goals that you need for your business. And I'll say it's a hard conversation for most SEs to have. It's very much like a sales rep type of like line, right? Because it's very hard sell. And it can put some people off, right? Because it's like you're kind of jujitsuing them or like judoing them, whatever you want to call it, like you're flipping their words against them. They said they need they have some kind of timeline to hit. Now you're saying they can't evaluate properly because of their timeline. And it feels like you're like antagonistic potentially. But if it's done well, I really do think it's extremely effective if you have some alternate forms of proof to like kind of like trade, right? It's a trade. You're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
a shorter POC. Hey, why don't we scope this to 1 week, 2 weeks max because you have this timeline, or just not run it at all. And we can like connect you with a customer that can like, speak to all these other points that you really want to test. And we'll just test the very minimum things that are like the delta, right? Like the difference from what you can get from just talking to our existing customers. And that's usually what I advise is like have really strong customer referrals. And that's hard to do potentially, but it's also not that hard to do because you only need a few that are just that really love you, and only test the delta. And yeah, and then you can use lines like that if you have something to trade. Yeah.
It's a great example of splitting the deal too. I mean, POCs, it's usually about engineer or end user validation, whereas we really want buyer validation. And so if you've got a team that is demanding to run a POC, and then you have a buyer saying we need a solution and we have a timeline, that's kind of a win-win because you might say, well, let's treat the POC as the start of your implementation. If we're successful with our POC, this is going to accelerate your timeline and enable you to achieve the outcome that you want much sooner. That's something that we've seen a lot of success with.
I like that point a lot, Dan. I, I, I think it was something that is worth saying twice is like if your POC is actually something that rolls straight into production, it's not always a weakness. It's not always even worth skipping.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if your POCs are actually like pre-production implementation in the sales cycle, it's value delivered up front and it like accelerates their time to go live, time to value. Like you just need to not call it a POC at that point because you're
Right.
underselling the value. Yeah. So.
Right. And it also strengthens that trust and that rapport as well. We're going to put some skin in the game for you. We get you. We know what your needs are, and we're going to prove it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask a question back, which is like, what about the risk that like you go through all of that effort and it's like, you know, supposed to purported like maybe it's not too much, right? Because it's obviously your product's easy enough to roll out that it goes straight to production, but it's still a good amount of effort. And then like you don't win the deal, right? Um, yeah, like how do you kind of like I still think like obviously the scope and things like that factor in, but how do you draw that balance maybe of like how much production rollout are you willing to do before they really close? How do you gain commitment and know that they're going to be a customer before you like really take it too far? If you get what I'm saying. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. It's it's a call that you have to make as a selling team, right? So we have a customer who, when they've created their demo assets, they kind of aligned them to qualification like L1, L2, L3. And the things that are quick and dirty, everybody gets. The things that take a little more time, only some people get. And then things that are more like that POC light experience, we have to be aligned and we have to have, a connection and a relationship to the economic buyer, some commitment. Again, to your point, Akash, SEs are not just technical, right? Like we have to wear the business hat. We have to be able to work with the AE, oftentimes work with other teams like product or, executive leadership, to all kind of come in and agree that this is a risk we're willing to take.
Just adding to that, the primary notion of also trying to get the POCs out faster depends on the teams that are involved, not just from the seller side, but also from the buyer side. The second point is the buyer, most often or not, we hear that, hey, we are going to start your POC from this state to this state, and then we are going to take the X competitor, try to do the same thing for them, and then Y competitor, try to do the same thing for them. If during the entire stitching process, if we are able to identify and then help the buyer understand the USP of every single product and then enable them to just test that, there could be a higher chance of us delivering the value on our promise rather than the base of what they're trying to set and then trying to use that base to evaluate all the other three tools. So that could actually give a smaller push or edge on our side, saying that, hey, we are good at this. And this at 1, 2, 3 steps will solve for this. Maybe just try evaluating us for what we are promising and then deliver on that promise rather than the one the buyer are bringing to the table. So that can also entirely change the dimensions on who is involved, what kind of data is needed, or who should be involved early on during the POC, so that it makes it easier for us to, for our sales team also to drive value. All of the dynamics changes just by adding that into the flavor.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. A lot of this getting into, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of the questions coming through in the chat. So as a reminder, we will be probably in the next about 10 minutes or so be hopping into a Q&A section. I've seen a lot of questions come through in Q&A. We've actually answered a lot of them through the course of the conversation, but if you have more you want us to dig into, specifically use that Q&A box to continue the conversation. One thing I want to make sure we spend some time digging into a little bit is how do you measure the effectiveness of these kind of alternative approaches we're taking, whether that's splitting down the POC into smaller chunks, whether you're how you're setting it up. How do you know what's working? How do you kind of measure that? How do you make sure that you're not hurting yourself by doing a POC avoidance or shifting the POC at all?
It's a great question. I think it goes back to a challenge I think a lot of SE orgs have, which is just KPI tracking in general. So one thing that, Opine really focuses on is aggregation of activity of what's going on and different opportunities across Slack, Teams, the actual call recordings, emails, etc. Just automatically understanding like what's going on in an opportunity. And like in that way, you can maybe actually you can definitely correlate like which of our wins were on like a POC light or a sandbox versus like, an actual deep dive POV or whatever. And there's ways of doing this, just in Salesforce natively if you're rigorous about like tracking like what's the technical proof method, right? If you have a field like that, that's an alternate way. Just have a multi-select field is the simplest thing you could do. It's just like technical proof like type and just like have a few different ways that your team has decided like we'll try and prove things and collect some data, you know what I mean? So
AJ or Dan, any other thoughts on this, on how to measure the alternative methods?
So hot take is the best metric for measuring POCs is you don't have POCs. But I think Akash, you covered a lot of the metrics. I mean, things I think about are the cost versus the win rate or the conversion there. The end, when we need to pull in people from outside of the SE team, the number of tickets or asks to R&D, things like that. Those are more the hard metrics.
I have again a different take just to keep the conversation interesting. I would like to maybe measure internally on the repeatability on the POCs, on what areas are being most asked for, and then trying to cut that from the POC. So if it takes us 15 days just to get things up and running, and if we cut it to 10 days, that's a win for the team. And in 10 days, if you're able to identify certain let's say involvements from the other team, and if you're able to streamline that, build a framework around that, and then try to chuck that specific time involvement, so that's a win. So if internal teams are still tied on hip to POCs, these metrics that traditionally which are driven through outcome can also be used as a magnifying glass for us to fix things internally and then see how fast can we respond to them. What are those artifacts that we have ready that can be just deployed, and then try to all the other things that we spoke earlier, the aha moments, the micro wins, the organizational alignment. All of these can also be at some variation brought back as KPIs, which affects the sales cycle, and then that can be linked back to the revenue leader, so that the POC metric that the SE puts as a time effort will be then converted to the revenue that can actually like point to the revenue leader. So though it could be like more involvement required, but as things fine tune, I think these numbers can talk for itself and then help out the whole SE org.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that measuring the individual components, definitely figuring out the best, what has worked best to reduce that time. I think great. Appreciate the inputs on this. I do want to do one more kind of question pivot to make sure we get to this topic before we end. And AJ, I'll throw this back to you to kind of kick off the answers here. Let's talk a little bit about emerging technologies. I'm assuming AI is going to come in at some place here. But what methodologies are you either seeing, using, experimenting with, or have seen implemented to go along with kind of evolving evaluations, whether it's with POCs, with the shortened kind of POCs we talked about here, or even POC avoidance? What technologies are you seeing used well to kind of help in this area?
So to start it off, pandemic changed our interaction with products. UX changed, UI changed, but sales has not changed. Because of pandemic, we got stuck to laptops more, and the whole buyer behavior or the whole usage of the laptop and how we interact with screens has upgraded. That being said, that also helps users to identify and educate themselves in their times, which means there should also be an agent that can answer after the discovery call is done, after the email is sent. At my own leisure, can I ask questions to a specific agent that can be like a buddy of the sales guy whom I'm in touch with? And can this agent be also extendable to my buying committee, so that if the leadership wants to understand integration with Salesforce, they can do it in their own time. If my manager wants to understand the integration with Pardot or Marketo, they can do it in their own time, which means we are decoupling the knowledge of the sales guy who, as a buyer, I'm in a single point touch with, and then expanding it to all the stakeholders in the buying committee involved. So AI sales agents is one thing that is primarily helping not just the seller, but also the buyer to educate their internal team members. And the second one, what we are also seeing in the market is agentic demos, which can actually like cut cost and try to make sure that these demos are built faster in order for the delivery of value to be done very early on, even before the switch flips for the buyer to say, hey, let's try to do a POC. But instead, the sales guy sends something that is much more easily consumable and then easily translatable to the whole buying ecosystem. That's where the true change lies. So these two areas, one is the AI sales agent, which can be your seller at the buyer's committee without your involvement, and the agentic demo piece could truly change how values are delivered for products being evaluated by anyone from the buying ecosystem.
So
Yeah.
I have a fairly strong philosophical different opinion about this. I really believe that AI is like a bicycle. It's a human machine interface that helps us be more efficient, do more with less. But I believe that it's most effective when the human is in front, for sure. So some of the things that we're doing and we're experimenting with are, using AI to enable our customers to very quickly and easily create and edit assets and get insights into their demoing behavior. But in my experience, and it could be that I'm just a crusty Gen Xer here, people buy from people. There's an element of trust and confidence that happens throughout the buying process that it's hard for me to imagine as a leader I would spend 6 figures talking to an AI agent. It's just a philosophical stake I'll put in the sand today. I'm very excited and open to changing my mind, but I feel like in my career and in the upmarket world that we're playing in, people want to talk to people. People trust people. People take risks by making buying decisions. And I'm not going to take a risk by trusting an AI agent today. Could be wrong.
It's interesting. No, I agree with parts of what you both said. Actually, Dan, I don't find your point like contradictory. I actually really agree with and I've said it to other folks myself, which is that especially up market, people are buying that human touch, that relationship. That's what they're paying for. So
Right.
if you try and replace it with AI, it's not going to be kosher for a while. And so the agents would have to get exponentially better from where they are today. Um, I actually really agree with that. And I think Jay's point also still stands, which is that like there's a lot of workflows that can be accelerated with AI in the selling motion. I don't think you're replacing a person, but you're replacing parts of what that person is forced to do today. Every single person is juggling so many things in their job. There's like all these tasks. There's no way an agent can just replace everything that human is doing. But there's certain components, very specific workflows that you can like really automate. And things that like our customers are really succeeding with are like pipeline review automation and like status like collection, right? So SE's tired of like having to update multiple stakeholders on the status
Oh,
of
yeah.
their opportunity. Some people in Salesforce, some people in Slack, or Teams or whatever. Like having to like manage both of those interfaces and keep their own personal notes and update the customer via email. So like just having that all centralized and automating that is like a simple workflow that is really quite automatable now.
Oh, yeah.
Meeting prep, for example, you're about to jump onto a meeting,
Sure.
and like, do you know what you're about to say? Like just cutting that completely out of the equation, just like here's everything from all the previous calls, here's everything you need. Like I think those types of workflows have been um, like pretty high value, and even things like drafting a business case, right? Like we'll just create a business case for you for your customer based on real conversations,
Oh, yeah.
accelerating like that conversion rate after you get a technical win, keeping the ACVs up. Um, that's like where we've seen some real punchiness, basically, in Opine anyway.
Dan, to be really honest, I'm with you. I don't want to buy from an AI. But the point is that for me to get educated on something, as a leader, I could be stuck on emails or I should be waiting on a Calendly link from the sales guy to just jump on a call and ask him like how things work.
Right.
So that's I'm trying to bring in the element of not like completely replacing the relationship, but can education be done? If I like talking to Dan, can I just text Dan on my
Yeah.
SMS and say,
Dan's
how
clone.
does integration work? Can you let me know so that I'm free now? I would want to know, but I can't do it over email or phone. So how do I do it?
Right.
So that's
Right.
where I feel that particular education also reduces the sales cycle, reduces the discovery, helps as a leader for me to qualify myself better and then present myself during the conversations on what problems exactly that I'm trying to solve for. So that's where I primarily wanted to like put my point on.
Yeah. Understood.
Right. But these are all great great ideas for this. I've always wanted this myself, so this is like very educational for me. All things I would definitely have used. We're closing the end. We're close to the end of our time here, and before we go, I want to make sure everyone has the chance to kind of give their final thoughts. AJ, I'll start with you. Your kind of maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not, but your final thoughts on this topic for everyone here attending.
So my hot take is that the technology is catching up faster to processes that are high impact and low effort. So that being said, there is a high probability for agents to play both the roles in order for agents to, number one, reduce the requirement of POC and build better visualization very early on during the discovery process through interactive experiences or offering synthetic data in order to drive forward. So that's where the importance of POC might go down on certain capacities. And the other part is agents can help when POCs are involved in order to streamline the process too. So the agentic piece can help in both ways. And my hot take is that agents exist either to reduce it or to make it better.
Excellent. Dan, over to you for your final thoughts.
Sure. So I think my take here, I don't know how hot it is, but we're not trying to replace the POC all the time. We're just trying to reduce the need for it. And when we do need to do an actual POC to make it as efficient and effective as possible, I think AJ, you mentioned this early on, like that confidence building, that conviction starts in marketing, right? It starts from the very beginning of that buyer journey, and it lives on through discovery and through, delivering demos and maybe in a sandbox. If we do a good job as sellers, and I think of us as solution engineers as sellers for sure, then we won't always be running into that POC because I really truly believe it's when there isn't enough confidence, when the buyer doesn't, not necessarily the buyer, but the evaluators don't have enough confidence to move forward without it. It's like we need to see something. We haven't gotten the message from our conversations or seen what we've needed in the demos. It's a signal that we're maybe not doing things as effectively as we could. There's always a place for POCs for certain situations, but I'd like to believe that we're going to reduce the need for them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Akash, over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll try and have a hot take, I guess. But I think in general, software is becoming more customizable, especially because a lot of people are adding AI components to their software. And so selling software is just going to get more complex because every software product is able to do more now than before, and is more configurable than ever and can be tailored to like the customer specific needs and all this stuff. So regardless of whether you can kind of avoid or like have to run a POC, POV to like prove things to your customers, I think what's being asked of the SE is going up.
Yeah.
SEs are basically forced to juggle more and more and more. And at the same time, everyone's counting on AI to like reduce the amount of effort. So like the same team can still like sell all these different new capabilities and like, manage even more pipeline this year than last year. And I think that like enablement of like helping an SE juggle all of those million things and like have that flow be as streamlined as possible, paved as possible, is like the kind of future of like how SEs will work. And that's basically why Opine exists. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Akash, Dan, AJ. Appreciate your time. Everyone here has been in the chat as well. I really appreciate that. And this for our final partner panel for the first half of the year. We'll see everyone soon, hopefully in a future panel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for
All
having
right.
us.
Thanks, everyone.